In this video, I want to talk about probability or your likelihood of getting injured. So on any given day when I go do a workout, I'm assessing a number of factors that are kind of the major buckets that I'm looking at to determine how my body is for that ready for that workout, or what's my overall likelihood of injury going into any given day. And those five main buckets that I look at are: number one, movement; number two, sleep; three, nutrition; four is my social emotional health; and then five is stress. And you can see here that I kind of put those two together because they have very similar effects on the nervous system. So what causes any injury, let's say that's a non-traumatic injury. So if it's a traumatic injury, there's going to be this element of chance. But when we're looking at non-traumatic, just sort of if I'm going to squat or deadlift today, what's my chances of getting injured? I'm looking at these five things because those are all our inputs to our nervous system. So when we get feedback from our nervous system based on the amount of stress that we're under, whether that be physical, mental, social stress, all of those things determine how ready you are for that given day's workout. So under the movement category, the things that I look at are prior injury, a lack of warm-up or a lack of priming of the tissues. So let's say if I tore my ACL last year and then I'm going into a athletic workout that involves cutting or agility type things, that prior injury is going to play a role on some level based on how ready I am for that workout. So prior injury, lack of warm-up. If I'm going in and my muscles are cold or my nervous system isn't ready, I haven't primed my muscles to be prepared for that workout, that's going to increase the chances that something else is going to compensate for a movement or a lift, and that's going to cause the potential for an injury. My technique, I think there's a strongest way to lift for many things, and if you're pushing the edges of those boundaries, if your technique is not where you want it to be, or if you're stiff and tight because you're not warmed up, you're not going to be able to access the technique that you're strongest in. And then lastly, overtraining or undertraining. I live and work in Boulder, Colorado, and oftentimes I see people that are hitting it once and twice a day, every day. So they're overtraining their tendons, their cartilage, everything. It almost needs more rest to allow for recovery and time for the body to adapt. So when I'm looking at and all of those things, of all of these, there's this overlying thing that the amount of focus that you have is very important that goes in for all of these. So being focused and being able to pay attention is key to minimizing your likelihood of getting injured. Now, what else contributes to that? So movement is a huge bucket. Also, the amount of sleep that I'm getting is going to essentially be the amount of recovery that I have for any given workout. So 2 nights ago, I went to the Avalanche game and I had a few drinks while I was there. I went to bed later than normal, and my recovery score was horrible the next day. And it's because my heart rate remained elevated throughout the night. And when your heart rate is remain elevated, you can't get into as deep of sleep. And if you can't get into as deep of sleep, then you're going to have trouble recovering or being ready for that next day's workout. So recovery, HRV is heart rate variability. I measure my heart rate variability using an Oura ring. It's a sleep ring that tells me how well I went into deep sleep, what my REM sleep and non-REM sleep were like. And those factors are really important for my internal level of stress. And that could be whether that internal level of stress came from a hard workout the day before, or in my case, that internal level of stress was due to some alcohol, a lack of sleep, being off of my nutrition. But proper sleep is going to fill that bucket up more. Also, resting heart rate, as I just mentioned, if I eat late at night or have alcohol, those things really increase my resting heart rate, which decreases my recovery. And then all of those things, if you're underslept, and we've all felt this before, when you're underslept, you have decreased coordination, decreased reactivity of the nervous system, your response time. Let's say I'm going into a heavy deadlift movement, and if I'm trying to pull through that movement, if my reaction time is slower to respond or use different muscles to help with that movement, to kick in or prime the nervous system, then that's going to increase the chance of injury again. Third thing, nutrition. So your nutrition is sort of the fuel for the whole system. I view that as your metabolic health. And I'm not going to go too deep into the nutrition part, but when it comes to training, you need to make sure you're getting adequate amounts of protein, because protein is going to be muscle synthesis, and that muscle, and it's going to be huge for the recovery component of workouts. And if you're not recovered, again, then your muscles are not going to have enough fuel for that day's workout or that day's activity. So with nutrition, I'm thinking about this as a metabolic health standpoint. Protein intake is huge. Hydration is another major component that I think gets often underlooked. So if I'm not hydrated enough going into a workout, I'm not going to have enough water content or fluid for my body, and that's going to mess up how well my fascial system's moving, and that plays a huge role in my overall ability for recovery too. You can measure hydration based on how thirsty you feel. You can use the color of your urine. So if you want kind of a light colored urine, if it's very dark, that tells me that you're dehydrated. And lastly, alcohol. If you're someone who's having alcohol most days of the week, I would highly recommend cutting that down to just trying to get to the weekends, or maybe a drink on Friday, drink on Saturday. When you were like me and I had a few beers on a Monday night, that impacts my total sleep, my total recovery going into the next few days. So we've covered movement, sleep, nutrition, social emotional health, and stress are the last two. And with those, these are sort of the intangibles. So if I've been working a whole bunch on the computer, which usually means I'm more stressed. If I'm not getting up and moving, my body is holding stress, or it correlates with a lack of movement. So if I'm working in this position quite a bit, my muscles and my nervous system is getting used to being in that position. So if I have to go from here to then do a big military press workout or heavy shoulder workout, my body's been in this position for a long time, and my ability to open up for other movements is going to be limited. And it's because I've been holding tension or holding stress in that one position. When you're holding a lot of stress, especially chronically, that increases your levels of cortisol, and increased levels of cortisol leads to increased inflammation. And if you have increased inflammation in your joints, then the joint proprioceptors and mechanoreceptors, the sensory input that we get regarding how in tune we are with each workout, is going to be significantly decreased. So when you're stressed, and this can be a stress that's due to work. It can also be stress that's related to, let's say, if I got in an argument with my wife or something like that. All of those things, I just view them as weighing on the mind, which then therefore weighs down on your body. And if your body is feeling heavy or slow or sluggish because of those things, that can be the felt sense of it in your mind, and then that can also be the physical manifestation of the inflammation. So those two buckets are huge, because to me that leads to a distracted nervous system. So if you're overly distracted, you're not in the right mindset to go into a hard workout. And if you're not in the right mindset, that's going to increase your chances or your likelihood of injury. So again, if you could view this as a pie chart, on any given day, let's say each one of those things takes up 20%. And if I didn't warm up fully because let's say this one, you have only 5% of that bucket, but you slept well and you have good nutrition, but those things wouldn't really happen, because usually when you're stressed, your sleep and your nutrition are off. And so all of these things interplay together. But let's say each one of these contributes 20% to your likelihood of injury. You need to make sure that you're trying to get as close to filling each one of those buckets, so your total scale of getting injured, your likelihood overall, is as low as possible. And by using these 5 factors, and yes, I'm sure there's more that goes into movement, there's going to be more factors that play into each of these, but the more in tune you are with those, that's going to decrease your risk of injury or your total probability of getting injured.